Hi, my name is McFalls, Billy Doug McFalls. I was born in Hazard, Kentucky. Um, I went to Hazard High School for 5 years. Um, I got a degree in street smarts from the University of Hard Knocks, and my major was in street smarts, of course, and I had a minor in street corner humor. So I only went to real college 1 year, and I flunked the whole thing. Um, my main interests through the years from early childhood were flying and music. I'm retired now, and I have taken an early second childhood, and I live in Fairfield, Iowa. I was born a poor blackie child. Although I grew up in Hazard, Kentucky, my parents lived in a small coal mining community called Blackie, Kentucky. And I'm a coal miner's son, and I'm also a coal miner's grandson. My first big break, it was a small town. The population now is about 150. It was booming back then. This was 48 when I was born. And there was probably, thousands of people in the area up in the hollers. This is like a remote area of eastern Kentucky where the mountains are steep and packed close together. But there was a lot of coal, and that was a big deal in those days. And so my dad worked in the coal mines. But my first big break was when my mother and father separated. I was 6 or 8 months old, have no memory of it whatsoever. But mom took me and moved to Hazard, Kentucky, where I was born. That was the only hospital in the area. And that's where her mother lived. And so we moved in with her mother and my mother's brother, my uncle. And that's where I grew up, in the gloomy shadow of the French Never Sold feud, of the neon glow of the American dream, and of the bright sunshine of the human spirit. Okay, so the next phase was I was drafted into the service and ended up in Vietnam. And that was a whole new experience for me in terms of my relationship with other people. Um, I learned my intuition was developed real strongly, especially during basic training. I had two of my best friends that I played music with and went to high school with were bunkmates with me. It was just, it was just a good luck. But it made the difference of, it's like it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. We were all looking at going to Vietnam. But at the same time, when we were off duty, we were having the greatest time there was, cracking jokes and learning about each other's. We were learning to read each other's funny bones, and it was so strong that I'd fallen in love while I was in high school. The lady that sat next to me in the band practice played trumpet, and my best friend Billy Joe, sat on the other side of her, and she told him to ask me to ask her out. And it's like, I'm senior in high school and I've never been out with a girl. So anyway, and I fell in love with her. So that was a great experience. That in the worst of times, that was one of the things that really helped me get through it, was experiencing that love. But also in basic training, I had this really deep connection with one of the guys that I was with, such that I wanted to be around him all the time, because as soon as I'd be around him, even when we were like marching or doing something, we're in basic training, we could have fun, and we could actually communicate without saying anything, just with our looks. and our facial expressions, and involving what was going on around us. And we had the best time ever was doing that. And I fell in love with the guy. It had nothing to do with sex at all. We're both just as straight as we could be, and rednecks, from a backwoods country. But this was really something else to have this experience. And it was our intuitions were being cultured to a real high degree. But anyway, we split up. He had to go one place and I had to go another after basic training was over. 2 weeks, I went to infantry training. He actually stayed in Fort Knox where basic training was. But that's another story. So the first 2 weeks I'm in AIT, infantry training, I cried myself to sleep every night because I missed that closeness, that bond. But I got over it, just like I'd gotten over losing my other girlfriend. And so when I went to Vietnam, all during my Army experience, I started really connecting with people, and I found some really, really, just really open-hearted, strong, and intelligent people in the Army. We're all draftees basically, but there were some really cool people. And I got, I was looking for them all the time. And I was finding them. And anyway, so once I get to Vietnam, then I go through a lot of changes. I see a lot of stuff. But in the end, it was like another big break for me. Okay, after I'd been in Vietnam for a while, it was like somebody was watching over me. I had dragged my feet, staying out of the draft as long as I could. It was almost 1970 before they got me. And by the time I got to Vietnam, things were kind of winding down a little bit. This was 1970. And the unit that they put me into, it was an infantry unit. They lost their last man just a few hours before I joined them. I was one of the replacements. And I was with them for 4 months, and we never saw any action after that. And at the end of it, while I was in it, I was a radio operator, which was not everybody wanted that job because you were pretty much a bigger target. And but I took it because there were some perks to it. And in the end, President Nixon decided that our unit, the 4th Infantry Division, stationed in Nam Cay in Vietnam, was going to go home, which meant that most of the people would stay and be redeployed in the country, and just a few people would go back to the United States. And somehow I was chosen out of probably 70, 80 radio operators in that infantry unit to be the jeep driver and radio operator for the major who headed up the liaison that organized the redeployment. He gave out the jobs and told people where they were going next. The little group, about a dozen people that were with him, at the end, he had saved the choicest jobs for us. And he sent me to Da Nang, and as an MP, military policeman, and in an R&R station, rest and relaxation. People coming and going on their 1 week leave, where they would go to Sydney or Thailand or Bangkok, Hong Kong, Tokyo, like that. And while I was there, the room that they put me in had this big bookcase full of the latest stuff, all the beat poets, stuff like Allen Ginsberg, and stuff that was like reminded me of the experience that I was having with Alice in Wonderland. One of the things I read was Bucky Fuller's book called I Seem to Be a Verb, which was pure spirituality. He wasn't talking about nuts and bolts and triangles and things like that. He was talking about human spirit, basically. And I had this experience of this unboundedness of myself and everything being separate from me. And it was very blissful. It was like another signpost. I thought, okay, I'm getting closer to something. And I'm starting to get a feeling like maybe there's something that I've seen before because I'm recognizing the path. And a few weeks later, I have another experience where I'm reading a book, another book, Tom Wolfe's Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, and I started um, becoming aware of deeper levels of everything around me and also inside me. And I saw to the level where everything was being created, everything was becoming alive and or appearing alive. It was like it was alive before, but I'm just seeing it at a deeper level now, seeing that everything was changing and that at the basis of everything, where everything was actually, everything was manifesting and unmanifesting at the same time. And at that point, I could see that there was an intelligence there and it was conscious. And I was getting closer and closer to it, and I recognized, I thought, this, this is what everybody calls God. And I sensed it closer within me and without me, and closer, and at a point, I couldn't tell the difference between me and it. It was all on the level of consciousness. And so then that's when I knew, okay, this is where all this has been leading. It was a path. And I reckon I looked back and I said, okay, this, all led to this. And I said, well, this, but I was by myself. Okay, what else is happening? The book I was reading, people were having this experience in the book. So I said, okay, I got to find these people. I want, this is not enough to just have it by myself. I want to experience this with other people. So I set my sights on a anti-war demonstration that was happening in Washington, D.C. May Day rallies, they call it. 5 days of demonstrations, well organized and planned well ahead of time. And I said, okay, this is probably where I'm going to find this experience again with other people. But before I could get there, a few weeks after the experience in Vietnam, I went to my hometown, Hazard, Kentucky, and my bunkmate, one of my bunkmates, was playing in a band. He invited me to come in and sit in with him for a while. They had a job at a nightclub, and so I was doing that for a while. And one night, I had that experience. Only this time, I had it. I could see that other people were having it at the same time. This was like redneck country, but the younger people were basically taking over this club, and and they were having a better time than the old crowd used to have. And I noticed that my consciousness was expanding. I was moving in the direction of the same experience I had in Vietnam. And I was looking around me and I saw this group over to one side all dancing together, which in this, redneck country, you just don't do that. But they're all dancing together like a bunch of hippies or something. And they're having the greatest time ever was. And I looked at them and I could see myself in them, and I could see that they were seeing themselves in me. And I could see that we were all seeing a huge consciousness behind all of us and at the depths of everything else. It was everything, it was everywhere in the environment. but it came through most concretely and most strong with other people. And that was like, oh, this is just a flow of love. I had the greatest time there was, and I was just doing really simple stuff, singing backup for some guys. And one of the guys was having the same experience. Okay, so after that experience in Hazard, Kentucky on stage, that's where two of the streams of my experience in life merged. One, music, and the other, higher states of consciousness. So I had found temporarily the what I figured was the epitome of higher states of consciousness was a merger of those two for me. You know, playing music isn't for everybody. But the next step was that I went to Washington, D.C., where I had set my sights before I left Vietnam. And sure enough, I went early, a few days early, and the organizers had a permit for a place called the Peninsula for where people could camp out who were going to be involved in the demonstrations. And a huge place. And I'd gotten there 3 or 4 days early just to hang out, and met a few people. Was hanging out with some people, and on the Saturday before the demonstration started, everybody poured in. On this peninsula, it was just packed with people from all over the country. And there's a feeling in the air, just brilliant, just lively, doing something together, palpable feeling of strength, of we can do something with this, and that there's something really special happening here. And on that Saturday, someone erected a tent, a big tent, big enough for maybe 20 people to stand up in. It was an air tent. It had a motor to it and a fan that kept it blown up and a big flap around the bottom of it. And I heard people clapping, just a steady clap, bang, 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 bang. And I was drawn to it. And I had this feeling, this is it. And so I came up to where it was like I had to go around tents and everything, get around to one side of it. And there was some guy standing there lifting up the flap and letting people in. And he was challenging everybody. Do you really want to go in there? Do you have any idea what's in there? And okay. And I thought about it. I said, yeah. So I'll go in. All they were doing was clapping. And you could hear it. And everybody, it was loud. Maybe, and there was about 20 people in there, all clapping, just real, together in a good solid rhythm. And I go around and get in, between a couple of them. And it's like the tent, the back of the tent, it's an oval tent. And the back of the tent was just a couple of feet away from me, just enough for someone to go around. And I'm looking into everybody's eyes, and they're all smiling from ear to ear. And I had the experience again. I saw myself in each one of them, and I could see that they were seeing themselves in me. And what was happening was that there was a flow between us. I was perceiving and giving the essence of life, love, basically is the best word I can use for it. And that was something that was not only good for us, but it was something that was energizing the whole crowd. And I had come looking for people, to team up with. But while I was there, I realized that I still had stuff to do. I would have to go back to Hazard and take care of some business back there. So I wasn't going to stay with anybody here. But the purpose I felt then was to go out and spread this, because I'd gone into a higher state of consciousness. It was like I understood everything that there was going on around me, and the higher purpose in life and a part of it, and I was empowered to the max, and I wanted this whole thing that was going on to be um, successful. I'd been in Vietnam, and I'd seen that it was really nothing like what people were seeing on the news or reading in the newspapers. It was just a terrible thing and should stop. So I was empowered. And so what I did was I just went back to the people where I was hanging out with, and just started, picked up a stick and a pop can and just started tapping on the thing. And I just, everybody in the area were totally into that. It was happening all around. People were clapping and just feeling that way. It just, the whole thing, 15,000 people in this place. And it's like, we're all one being, and we're on the edge of something that's really special. But it didn't last. We went out and we did the demonstrations, 5 days of it. We were successful. I had to be careful, but I couldn't get arrested. A lot of people got arrested. They packed the whole stadium full of people, arrested them and packed them in a stadium. And they let them out later. After it was over with, the experience was gone. But I was left with the memory of it. I'd seen heaven. I'd been through the heaven's door, and I knew that that was the only game in town anymore. And so that was my main focus, and music. So I went back to Hazard, and it was like I just didn't have the experience anymore. And it was a few years before I was still in Hazard, and I was in the dime store and in the paperback section, and I found a book called The Science of Being and the Art of Living by Mahesh Yogi. And I thought, I'd heard of him because of the Beatles, just vaguely. And I was wondering at that time, as I was actually looking into Buddhism as maybe a way of bringing that experience back. And I was dabbling in Zen macrobiotics, which actually enhanced my experience because I was cleaning out the physiology and the nervous system and everything. But when I read the book, I said, this is it. He's giving me a technique that will give me that experience, and it looks to me like this could be permanent. And so this is what I want. So I went, as soon as I could. I had to find out where to go first, but I went to Lexington, Kentucky, got initiated along with my girlfriend, and that was it. On the second day's checking, I meditated for a little bit with the instructor, and when I came out, I knew I had it. I was totally transformed. I felt for the first time completely at ease, without any fear, energized and wide awake, and just absolutely peaceful. And so I just, okay, that's it. I found it. It's just that, I have to just keep doing this. And so as soon as I got a chance, I moved to Fairfield, Iowa, where Maharishi had established a university, and there was a large group of people meditating there. And I loved it there. It was like all the people that were involved in that, they were just so easy to get along with, showing a lot of intelligence, and just fun to be around. So I lived in Fairfield for like 15 years, and then after a while, I learned that there was a group Maharishi had established for single men called Purusha, and I was, at the time that I got interested in it, I was working at the university in the printing press. I was running a printing press, and I decided, okay, let's check this out. I didn't have a girlfriend. I was, self-sufficient. I didn't have a lot of responsibilities, and so I thought it's just like Purusha seemed like kind of like a monastery, only without a religion. And so I thought, okay, let's give it a shot. Let's try it. So I signed up, and I went there. They were in North Carolina at the time, And they just built a really nice facility. Marshy, you know, had it built for us. And I was on Purusha for 24 years. And it was 24 years, it was like a third of my life, but it was the most progressive third of my life. It was like completely empowered me to the point where I started feeling this experience that I'd had before was starting to grow in me and remain in me. It was still mild compared with the big experiences that I'd had, and it was mild, but it was stable and it was growing. So Fairfield beckoned. I, while I was on Purusha, music was completely out of the picture. But before I actually left the Purusha group, I started feeling a pull toward the music again, and so I moved back to Fairfield so I could pursue it full time. And since then, it's like for the first time in 50 years, a dream that started while I was in Vietnam to write music and to play that music started to get some traction. And so now that's what I'm doing. I'm in my second childhood and I'm playing.